Imagine a miracle drug, powerful enough to silence screams, mend shattered bodies on the battlefield, and offer quiet solace in the face of agonizing disease. For millennia, humanity has sought such a balm. But what if this very miracle held a darker secret, a hidden cost that would unfold across generations? This is Of That Drug, a tale of scientific triumph intertwined with profound human consequence. Long before modern medicine, ancient civilizations recognized the poppy's peculiar power. In the mud-brick cities of Sumer and Akkad, over 4,000 years ago, clay tablets hinted at a joy plant, likely the ancestor of opium. Minoan frescoes on Crete depict poppy heads, suggesting ritual significance. The Ebers Papyrus from Egypt, dating to 1550 BC, listed poppy-based remedies for pain, coughs, and sleeplessness. This wasn't merely folk wisdom, it was a deeply integrated component of early pharmacopoeias. From India, where Sanskrit texts described ahifenna, to China, which used it to calm anxiety and stomach ailments, opium was a trusted, versatile medicine. The Greco-Roman world, too, understood its uses. Hippocratic practice employed poppy preparations, and figures like Dioscorides cataloged its soporific and analgesic properties in his Materia Medica, a medical Bible for centuries. Roman merchant ships carried not just spices, but jars of poppy latex, weaving networks of pain relief across Antioch and into Gaul. The substance flowed, a quiet comfort passed down through generations, its power undeniable, its dangers largely unseen or misunderstood. For centuries, medical practitioners didn't think in molecules, but in textures and infusions. To create laudanum, a common opium tincture, apothecaries steeped raw opium in alcohol, often adding spices, then bottled the concoction. It was a potent, if imprecise, remedy for ailments from a seafarer's stomachache to a child's feverish night. The uncertainty of its composition was simply accepted. There was no alternative. Across the Mediterranean, from monastery gardens to Baghdad and Toledo, techniques for concentrating plant juices and tempering their strength with wine or honey spread. The Islamic world, through scholars like Avicenna, whose canon of medicine guided medical practice for half a millennium, further refined the understanding of opium. This knowledge traveled north into medieval universities and apothecaries in Paris and Bologna. The printing press accelerated the dissemination of recipes, and figures like Paracelsus in the 16th century championed a more chemical approach to remedies. Later, in the 17th century, the English physician Thomas Sydenham popularized laudanum as a widely useful medicine. These were the years before antibiotics, and laudanum was a powerful, portable panacea for a vast range of human suffering. The slow accumulation of these practices and the growing hunger for scientific order laid the groundwork for a profound shift. Chemists at the turn of the 19th century began to suspect that within the complex mixtures of nature, pure active principles existed. The story of morphine's isolation begins not in a grand laboratory, but in a quiet German town. In 1803, an apothecary apprentice named Friedrich Turner, working in Paardeetborn, began a meticulous pursuit. Turner wasn't content with tinctures. He sought a stable, measurable agent. Through careful acidic and alkaline manipulations, repeated crystallizations, and patient observation, he achieved the unthinkable. He produced a bitter, white crystalline substance that, when administered, replicated opium's signature effects: sleep, profound pain relief, and a peculiar euphoria. He named it morphium, after Morpheus, the Greek god of dreams, reflecting its sleep-inducing power. Turner's discovery was a revelation. Where many saw opium as an aggregate remedy, he declared a distinct chemical principle at its core. His published findings, including daring self-experiments, showcased that this pure substance could reproduce opium's power without the bulk or variability of crude latex. This breakthrough arrived as chemistry was transforming into a systematic discipline fueled by figures like Antoine Lavoisier. Other chemists swiftly replicated Turner's work, and the isolation of active principles from plants, quinine, strychnine, caffeine, codeine, became a standard goal, ushering in the field of alkaloid chemistry. Morphium became morphine in the English-speaking world, a sharper, more clinical name for a tangible, measurable drug. Morphine's crystalline form wasn't just a scientific curiosity, it was an industrial blueprint. By the 1820s and 1830s, commercial houses in Germany, notably E. Merck in Darmstadt, recognized alkaloids as a new commercial opportunity. A stable, reproducible substance could be shipped globally in labeled bottles. Laboratories moved from solitary benches to factory floors, and chemistry departments began training technicians for these emerging pharmaceutical enterprises. This wasn't yet 20th century mass production, but it was a decisive step towards reliable, standardized medicines. Two key developments accelerated morphine's impact. First, chemists learned to characterize compounds precisely, allowing for informal standardization across borders. Second, they discovered that many active plant compounds were more soluble and easier to administer as salts. Morphine sulfate and hydrochloride, for example, could be made into water-soluble crystals, transforming it into an injectable solution. This was the hinge on which medicine swung into a new era. The final piece of this transformation arrived in 1853, when French surgeon Charles Praz and Scottish physician Alexander Wood independently developed the hypodermic syringe. This device bypassed the slow, unpredictable digestive system, delivering medication directly into the bloodstream. Morphine, once an oral or topical remedy, became a rapid, potent agent of immediate relief. A field surgeon could now offer swift pain alleviation. A suffering individual could find sleep within minutes. It was a practical alchemy, making doctors feel empowered and, for a time, almost miraculous. But this newfound efficiency would also magnify morphine's capacity to create dependence. The 19th century, with its industrial might and rapid communication, found new markets for morphine. Pharmacies in Paris and London stocked bottled salts. Advertising and commercial catalogs listed it alongside other chemical products. But it was war, particularly the American Civil War, that became a brutal, large-scale experiment for the new drug. Surgeons on the front lines used morphine widely to treat the horrific wounds, amputations, and fevers of the conflict. The hypodermic syringe was readily available, and the need for pain relief after days of unrelenting violence was immense. Men received morphine in field tents, on transport to general hospitals, before amputations, and again in wards for sleep. The small, precise dose brought near-instant relief, and soldiers, grateful and bewildered, came to rely on the needle's comfort. When these veterans returned home, many carried not only physical scars, but a new, insidious dependency. Physicians, despite their good intentions, didn't fully understand the distinct public health problem emerging. By the late 19th century, a term appeared in medical commentaries, soldier's malady, an awkward euphemism for the fact that those faithfully treated for their wounds had been exposed to an efficient agent of relief that could leave an enduring compulsion. It was a dark irony. What had been a reassuringly ancient remedy had, through modern technique and scale, become a source of widespread, medically sanctioned dependence. To truly grasp morphine's power and peril, we must look at its molecular dance within the body. Morphine binds avidly to the mu-opioid receptor, a protein pocket on cell membranes. When it occupies this receptor, it effectively turns down the volume of pain signaling in the brain and spinal cord, creating a multi-layered blockade. This biochemical choreography blunts the relay of noxious impulses, reshaping the experience of suffering. But morphine does more than just quiet pain. The mu receptor is also found in limbic structures and brainstem nuclei, influencing mood and motivation. In certain brain regions, morphine disinhibits dopamine-producing neurons, causing dopamine levels to rise. This surges reward signaling, washing over a frightened body with a soothing, sometimes radiant sense of relief and pleasure. This is why morphine doesn't just quiet pain, it quiets the fear that often accompanies it. However, the same molecule also presses against crucial medullary respiratory centers. It reduces responsiveness to carbon dioxide, slowing the impetus to breathe. Too much morphine can lead to shallow breathing, missed signals of rising CO2, and ultimately respiratory arrest. It also affects the ancient nervous system within the gut, reducing peristaltic contractions and tightening sphincters, a reliable effect causing constipation. Clinicians learned these hard truths. The rapid onset of intravenous or subcutaneous morphine could quickly alleviate suffering, but also accelerate associative learning and reward pathways, increasing the likelihood of addictive patterns. Beyond the battlefield and hospital, laudanum became the domestic face of opium, a common currency in Victorian households. Steeped in alcohol and spices, it sat on kitchen shelves as a remedy for coughs, colic, teething infants, menstrual pain, and nervous conditions, politely labeled hysteria or melancholia. It was mixed into tea, spooned out as cordials, a household elixir. Patent medicines amplified laudanum's popularity. Boxes and vials promised cures with bold claims and testimonials. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, for example, was marketed with lithographs of contented babies, often disguising morphine and opium under euphemisms like soothing or for the nerves. Measurement was imprecise. A few drops in tea could quickly escalate. The heartbreaking result was often infant mortality and long-term dependence for those who survived. Gender shaped this economy. Women, frequently portrayed as both consumers and victims, found in laudanum a reprieve from injury, exhaustion, social isolation, and overwhelming domestic responsibilities. While a gentleman's opium habit might be framed as creative indulgence, a poor or female addict often faced shame. This chronic self-medication, invited by readily available elixirs for recurrent ailments, led to widespread hidden dependence with uneven social penalties. The scale of domestic and battlefield dependence eventually sparked anxiety. The 19th century saw the first attempts to standardize medicines, with pharmacopoeias codifying doses. Municipal health boards pushed for clearer labeling, but the patent medicine industry, with its secret formulas and commercial protections, thrived. Pressure on governments mounted in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Missionaries and moral reformers decried opium use. Temperance activists linked alcohol and drug abuse, and physicians reported infant deaths and chronic dependency. Internationally, the International Opium Commission in Shanghai and the International Opium Convention at The Hague marked the first coordinated efforts to control the global opium trade, driven by humanitarian, national, and imperial concerns. In the United States, two landmark laws reshaped medicine. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 mandated truthful labeling, forcing the declaration of ingredients like morphine and cocaine. This public health intervention, disguised as consumer protection, undercut the patent medicine industry by demanding transparency. The Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914 then shifted the terrain to taxation, registration, and criminal enforcement. It required doctors and pharmacists to register and maintain detailed records. In practice, it severely narrowed the space for medical maintenance, often criminalizing physicians who continued to prescribe to dependent patients. This led to a cruel paradox. Once legal and accessible, morphine and other opiates became difficult to obtain medically, pushing desperate users towards illicit markets and black market heroin. The impulse to innovate continued even as regulation lagged. The 20th century became a laboratory of molecular sculpture, attempting to refine morphine's virtues while discarding its flaws. In 1898, Bayer, a German chemical firm, introduced diacetylmorphine, trademarked as heroin. Marketed as a cough suppressant and a supposedly less addictive morphine substitute, it promised heroic relief. However, the very chemical alteration that made heroin faster to cross the blood-brain barrier also made its euphoric rush more intense and more liable to capture attention. It was not less addictive, but often more so. Within 2 decades, heroin was recast as a social menace, and its sale and use became severely restricted. Later, in the 1930s and 40s, amid geopolitical storms, chemists at IG Farben synthesized methadone, a synthetic analgesic structurally unrelated to morphine. When taken orally, its long half-life made it useful for steady pain relief and later for opioid dependence treatment. By the 1960s, researchers like Vincent Dole and Marie Neiswander discovered that methadone maintenance could blunt heroin cravings, allowing addicted individuals to rebuild their lives, reframing addiction from a moral failing to a treatable chronic condition. In the 1960s, Belgian pharmacologist Paul Johnson introduced fentanyl, a synthetic opioid quietly magnificent in its potency, 100 times stronger than morphine. Perfect for surgery and anesthesia, its rapid action and tight binding made it invaluable in operating theaters. However, its potency also made it incredibly dangerous in a world where pills and powders could be diverted, combined, or sold on the black market. Each new generation of opioids designed to refine pain relief inadvertently brought new risks and new ways for bodies and societies to be harmed. By the close of the 20th century, opioids, descendants of morphine, became an ordinary domestic presence, driven by a convergence of medical concepts, evolving guidelines, and an industry eager to supply solutions. This led to what public health analysts, particularly in the United States, describe as 3 waves of opioid-related mortality. The first wave, beginning in the 1990s and cresting through the 2000s, was propelled by prescription opioids like oxycodone and hydrocodone. Sales and prescriptions rose sharply as clinicians and patients embraced them as safe, modern remedies for chronic pain. The Pain as the Fifth Vital Sign initiative further encouraged aggressive pain management, often leading to increased opioid prescribing. Around 2010, the second wave began, seeing heroin replace prescription pills as the lethal opioid of the street. Reformulations of prescription drugs, making them harder to crush, and tighter prescribing rules constricted the legal supply, pushing demand towards cheaper, more accessible illicit heroin. Then, the third and most lethal wave arrived in the mid-2010s, illicitly manufactured fentanyl and its analogs. Tiny, terrifyingly potent molecules folded into heroin, pressed into counterfeit pills, or sold as powder. Fentanyl's extreme potency meant a few grains could produce dozens of doses, driving traffickers to favor it and public health authorities to watch in dread as mortality curves soared. This trajectory, from prescriptions to heroin to fentanyl, was not purely American, but mirrored in Canada, Australia, and parts of Europe, highlighting the devastating consequences of massive prescribing, aggressive marketing, and porous illicit markets. Out of these horrors and logistical failures, a body of practice and research slowly matured. What became known as harm reduction and medication-assisted treatment gained urgency. Naloxone, an opioid antagonist, moved from niche hospital medication to community lifesaver, distributed to first responders and laypeople, reversing respiratory depression in minutes. Prescription monitoring programs were rolled out, and the CDC's 2016 guideline sought to reduce overprescribing. Lawsuits against pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors accusing companies of misleading the medical community also increased. Methadone maintenance, established decades earlier, and buprenorphine, approved in 2002 for office-based prescribing, provided evidence-based treatments that reduced illicit opioid use and overdose risk. Harm reduction measures, once fiercely resisted, gradually won scientific vindication. Syringe service programs reduced HIV transmission, and supervised consumption sites demonstrated reductions in overdose deaths. Countries like Portugal and Switzerland, through decriminalization and medically assisted treatment, showed that humane policies could significantly reduce harm without increasing drug use. However, barriers remain: restrictive regulations, patient caps, stigma among clinicians and the public, and legal challenges to harm reduction services. The COVID-19 pandemic, ironically, brought pragmatic adaptations, as regulators relaxed rules for telemedicine initiation of buprenorphine and increased take-home doses of methadone, proving that long-standing restrictions could be loosened without catastrophe. Morphine was, and often still is, a miracle drug. It enables surgeons, provides humane end-of-life care, and is essential to emergency medicine. Yet this miracle carries a double edge. The same biological pathway that quiets pain can, in different social and economic contexts, become a pathway to dependence when supply, prescribing culture, and social supports are misaligned. The history of opioids teaches humility. New medicines, especially those altering subjective states, ripple outward unpredictably. It highlights systems thinking. Narrow interventions to restrict supply without expanding treatment often displace harm. And it underscores the interplay of stigma and policy. Framing drug use as a moral failing narrows policy to punishment, while viewing it as a public health problem opens a wider range of interventions. Moving forward, the landscape is both technological and ethical. Researchers explore biased agonists and alternative analgesic strategies. Precision medicine promises better pain phenotyping. But technology alone won't solve social questions like housing instability or untreated mental illness. Policy reform must remain central, balancing timely pain relief with preventing dependence and rapidly treating those who develop opioid use disorder. This demands structural reforms, clinician training, reduced regulatory hurdles for treatment, expanded non-pharmacologic options, and robust funding for harm reduction. The phrase soldier's malady should not be an ancient relic, but a cautionary tale. Medical necessity in one moment can become social affliction in another if systems do not adapt. This ongoing governance task requires vigilance, humility, and the willingness to learn from both data and lived experience. The history of morphine is not merely a technical problem, but a civic one, reminding us that powerful molecules bend society, and society must learn to bend back.